Number 10. Mickey Gall burst into the UFC with a professional mixed martial arts record of 1-0. In his UFC debut, he faced Mike Jackson at UFC Fight Night 82, where he won the fight in just 45 seconds by submission via a rear naked choke in the first round. He next faced former WWE superstar CM Punk at UFC 203, where he made quick work of CM Punk, finishing him by submission via a rear naked choke in the first round. He recently faced Sage Northcutt at UFC on Fox 22, where he won the fight by submission via a rear naked choke in the second round. He is a talented fighter who has a lot of potential to become a serious contender one day. It will be interesting to see how he progresses in 2017. Number 9. After losing his title fight at UFC on Fox 17, Donald Cerrone decided to move up to the welterweight division and made his welterweight debut against Alex Oliveira at UFC Fight Night 83, where he won the fight by a triangle choke in the first round. He next TKO'd Patrick Cote at UFC Fight Night 89 and also TKO'd Rick Story at UFC 202. He recently faced Matt Brown at UFC 206, where he won the fight by knockout in the third round. He has just looked sensational in the welterweight division, and I believe if he continues to keep winning impressively, he will be challenging for the UFC welterweight title at the end of 2017. Number 8. After losing to Uriah Hall at UFC Fight Night 75, Gegard Mousasi came into 2016 with something to prove and faced Thales Leites at UFC Fight Night 84, where he won the fight by a unanimous decision. He next finished Thiago Santos by knockout at UFC 200 and TKO'd Vitor Belfort at UFC 204. He next faced the last man to defeat him, Uriah Hall, in a rematch at UFC Fight Night 99, where in the fight he defeated him by TKO in the first round. Gegard Mousasi has had a great year and has shown that he is a serious threat in the UFC middleweight division. I believe he is 1 or 2 wins away from a title shot. Number 7. After defeating Michael Johnson at UFC on Fox 17, Nate Diaz used his post-fight interview to call out Conor McGregor to a fight. When Rafael dos Anjos was forced to pull out of the title fight against Conor McGregor, the UFC approached Nate Diaz, offering the opportunity to fight Conor McGregor at UFC 196. Nate Diaz accepted the fight on 2 weeks' notice, and the fight was official. In the fight, Nate Diaz shocked the world when he submitted Conor McGregor in the second round. This win made Nate Diaz into a superstar and became a big name in the MMA world. With Conor McGregor not happy with the result, an immediate rematch was booked between both fighters at UFC 202, where Conor McGregor won the fight by a majority decision. This event went on to become the biggest pay-per-view of all time, selling 1.65 million pay-per-view buys. 2016 helped Nate Diaz become one of the biggest stars in the UFC, and hopefully we get to see the trilogy fight in 2017. Number 6. Coming into 2016, Max Holloway was on an 8-fight winning streak, defeating all of the top contenders in the UFC featherweight division. He faced top UFC featherweight Ricardo Lamas at UFC 199, where he won the fight by a unanimous decision. He finally got the chance to fight for UFC Gold and face Anthony Pettis for the interim UFC featherweight title at UFC 206. In the fight, Max Holloway's forward pressure was too much for Anthony Pettis to handle. Max Holloway eventually finished him by TKO in the third round, becoming the champion. This win guarantees him a shot at the current UFC featherweight champion Jose Aldo in 2017. Max Holloway has looked better with each fight, and it will be interesting to see how he does against Jose Aldo when they unify the titles. Number 5. In 2015, Tyron Woodley was booked to fight Johnny Hendricks in a possible number 1 contenders bout at UFC 192, but just a day before the weigh-ins, Johnny Hendricks was admitted to the hospital due to an intestine blockage and the fight was cancelled. Tyron Woodley had defeated Dong Yong Kim and Kelvin Gastelum and decided to sit out and wait for his title shot. In 2016, his opportunity came to fight for the title against then UFC welterweight champion Robbie Lawler at UFC 201. Robbie Lawler had looked so dominant as the champion, and many had thought Tyron Woodley had no chance. In the fight, Tyron Woodley brutally knocked out Robbie Lawler in the first round, shocking the world, and became the new UFC welterweight champion of the world. He next defended his title against number 1 contender Stephen Thompson at UFC 205, where the fight was ruled a majority draw. Tyron Woodley has come a long way from being a contender to becoming a UFC champion. It will be interesting to see how he does against the top 5 of the UFC welterweight division in 2017. Number 4. In early 2016, Stipe Miocic was scheduled to face Andrei Arlovski at UFC 195. This fight would determine who would fight then UFC heavyweight champion Fabricio Verdum next. In the fight, Stipe Miocic made quick work of Andrei Arlovski, knocking him out in the first round. He next faced then UFC heavyweight champion Fabricio Verdum at UFC 198, where he viciously knocked out Fabricio Verdum in the first round to become the new UFC heavyweight champion of the world. He was next scheduled to make his first title defense against the dangerous Alistair Overeem at UFC 203. In the fight, Stipe Miocic knocked out Alistair Overeem in the first round, retaining his title. Stipe Miocic has looked sensational, putting together 3 first-round knockouts. He has just looked so dominant, and I believe he will hold on to the UFC heavyweight title for a long time. Number 3. In early 2016, Cody Garbrandt faced Augusto Mendes at UFC Fight Night 83, where he won the fight by TKO in the first round. He was next scheduled to face rising bantamweight Thomas Almeida at UFC Fight Night 83. Thomas Almeida looked like a savage, destroying his opponents, and had an undefeated record of 21-0. Cody Garbrandt was unranked going into this fight, and many believed that Thomas Almeida would just run through Cody Garbrandt, but that wasn't the case. In the fight, Cody Garbrandt's speed and power was too much for Thomas Almeida and finished him by knockout in the first round. He next knocked out Takeya Mizugaki at UFC 199 to earn himself a title shot against then UFC bantamweight champion Dominic Cruz. Dominic Cruz's elusiveness and footwork proved too much for his past opponents. Both fighters met at UFC 207, where Cody Garbrandt pulled off a massive upset, winning the UFC bantamweight title by unanimous decision. Cody Garbrandt has come a long way from being an unranked fighter in the beginning of the year to becoming the UFC bantamweight champion. I believe that this is just the beginning for Cody Garbrandt, and I believe we have so much to see from him in 2017. Number 2. Coming into 2016, Amanda Nunes had put together 2 solid wins over Shayna Baszler and Sarah McMahon. She faced fierce Muay Thai specialist Valentina Shevchenko at UFC 196, where she won the fight by unanimous decision. She was next granted the title shot against then UFC bantamweight champion Miesha Tate at UFC 200. In the fight, she brutalized Miesha Tate in the first round and eventually submitted her by a rear naked choke in the first round to become the new UFC bantamweight champion of the world. She recently faced former champion Ronda Rousey at UFC 207. Many people thought that this would be the biggest test for Amanda Nunes' career, but that wasn't the case. Amanda Nunes put a one-side beating on Ronda Rousey, defeating her by TKO in just 48 seconds to retain her title. Right now, Amanda Nunes looks unstoppable, and it will be interesting to see if she can keep up these impressive wins in 2017. Number 1. Michael Bisping has had so many ups and downs in his UFC career. He had come so close many times in possibly challenging for the world title, but would come up short. In early 2016, he was scheduled to face MMA legend Anderson Silva at UFC Fight Night 84. After a close back and forth fight, Michael Bisping was given the unanimous decision victory. Now Michael Bisping had 3 solid wins to be considered for title contention. The middleweight title was set to be defended at UFC 199. Luke Rockhold would defend his UFC middleweight title against Chris Weidman in a rematch at UFC 199. Luke Rockhold had finished Chris Weidman by TKO in the 4th round at UFC 194 to become the new UFC middleweight champion. Chris Weidman requested his rematch and was given the opportunity to face Luke Rockhold again. Just a couple of weeks before the fight, Chris Weidman was forced to pull out due to suffering a neck injury. Michael Bisping stepped in on short notice to face Luke Rockhold at UFC 199. Both fighters had fought before at UFC Fight Night 55, where Luke Rockhold defeated Michael Bisping by a guillotine choke in the first round. Many believed that this would be an easy title defense for Luke Rockhold and were overlooking Michael Bisping's skills. In the fight, Michael Bisping pulled off the upset, knocking out Luke Rockhold in the first round and became the UFC middleweight champion. He next successfully made his first title defense against Dan Henderson by defeating him by a unanimous decision at UFC 204. Who would have thought that Michael Bisping would become champion? He has definitely proved a lot of people wrong, and it will be interesting to see how he does in 2017.